our webinar this evening. Our webinar is entitled Smart Lighting with a live demonstration of City Touch CMS system. So people talk about smart cities, but do they actually know what that means? Being smart about what lighting assets can do for the asset owner. So our speakers this evening from Signify, Sean Campbell, the Key Account Manager, and Michael Wilkinson, Systems Architect, will explore what smart is all about. Please put up any questions you may have throughout the presentation, and Sean and Michael will address them at the end. And if I could ask everybody to use the Q&A as opposed to the chat, it's just easier for Sean and Michael to manage. So without anything further, I'll hand you over to Sean. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jean. Hope everyone can hear me okay. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to come on tonight, and I suppose to have a look at smart lighting. Just to introduce ourselves, as Jean said, my name is Sean Campbell. I'm the road lighting manager for Ireland. I look after road lighting, all external lighting really from that aspect. And obviously Michael Wilkinson is our systems architect. I'll just run through the agenda here, and Mike, you can obviously jump in and out as we go. So tonight's agenda obviously is an introduction to Signify and who we are, why smart lighting and what smart lighting is all about, and then obviously we're going to do a demo just about what the Interact City, which is one of our products that basically we can have a look at tonight. So I suppose just to run through really who Signify are. So I suppose most people would obviously identify lighting as Philips in terms of the world's leading brand, but a couple of years ago Signify bought out obviously Philips Lighting, and it's the new name as such for Philips Lighting globally. Who we are, we're the #1 I suppose manufacturer of lighting in the world. We obviously produce light sources in terms of your domestic premises. We also have the luminaires that you would see in your office spaces, you know, shops, factories, etc. And then obviously the likes of Croke Park or anywhere in terms of lighting, stadium and stadia, and in terms of services. So I suppose we have 27,000 people working globally for the company. We had 6.4 billion in terms of sales in 2018, and I suppose we're the industrial lead really. As a John Jones company have said, we are the lead lighting company in the globe. So I suppose from that perspective alone, we're a large company globally. I work obviously in the Irish market. Mike is obviously based in England, and he looks after a lot of different facets of the business in the UK, and one of them being Interact City, which we're going to have a look at in a few minutes. So just to go through Signify. Signify, I suppose, is a global brand really. We are the first lighting company to be actually carbon neutral. So I suppose what does that actually mean? I suppose really what we've looked at over the number of years now is we've looked at obviously our CO2 emissions. We've looked at how we can make ourselves better in our carbon footprint. So this year, I suppose we've announced that we are obviously carbon neutral, and obviously we have targets that we're looking to achieve, and also we're looking at going further on how we manage our business, how we do our, I suppose, our circular economy in terms of how we manufacture our products. For example, one of the biggest things at the moment now is digital printing, where we actually print lanterns, luminaires, etc. So I suppose from that perspective alone, and looking at our carbon footprint, we've obviously identified that as a large global business, we need to be seen to be doing the right thing in terms of our carbon footprint. So that's, I suppose, a very positive start to 2020. I know for a very bad year as such for a lot of people in terms of COVID-19, but in terms of what our sustainability and our long-term growth and our long-term business, we've looked at how we do business and how we do things right. So that's just a couple of stats there, and obviously show that what we've done and what we're planning to do over the next number of years in terms of our carbon footprint. Some of our brands, I suppose, is Signify really, and I suppose everyone's very aware of Philips in terms of what we do in a marketplace. We have obviously Interact, which we'll run through in a few minutes. Color Kinetics is one of our brands where we actually would use a lot of lighting in terms of facades and etc. And I'll show you some examples of that. Again, some theatre lighting, and again, Philips Hue would be a brand that obviously would be more domestic. So you'd have some colour lighting, etc. in your domestic premises. So I suppose from a brand point of view, Signify just isn't the standard street light on the street. We are a global brand, and we have a number of different hats really. So from that perspective alone, I suppose we get into the presentation, I suppose, and why smart lighting. And I suppose people ask the question all the time. There's this thing thrown around about smart cities. What is a smart city? What is, you know, the questions are always put out there and say, oh yeah, I know about smart cities. Oh, it's all about internet. It's all about this and it's all about that. But in reality, I suppose a number of different things is, you know, I suppose Lord Kelvin spoke about it in terms of to measure is to know. And obviously in terms of what we do in road lighting, we obviously do a lot of calculations. We do a lot of background checks in terms of the likes of bug and in terms of obviously different facets of what we're trying to achieve as a designer to actually delivery on a roadway and what's actually met by standards. And in terms of trying to, I suppose, different locations versus what lighting classifications are, we have to be seen to be doing things right. And as a global business, we obviously do that. So I suppose what I'm trying to get here is we have, no one in the world can obviously pick out a lighting source as such with the naked eye, but in terms of obviously measuring and obviously in terms of energy and obviously the way energy is going at the moment, we have to be seen to be doing the right thing in terms of our energy requirements, and obviously lighting requirements is a key aspect that people normally forget about. So looking, I suppose, at the world itself is changing. In 2020 has seen obviously global trends in shaping our own business in terms of population growth and urbanization, in terms of people moving to cityscapes, I suppose in terms of resource challenges of obviously getting resources, and then again in terms of digitalization, so the move to 5G networks, and of course working from home. So working from home in 2020 has been a big one for a lot of people in Ireland. Looking at a lot of people who have moved to Dublin over the years and worked in office spaces. And if you go to Dublin today, which was there this morning, I suppose there's still a certain amount of people who are moving in Dublin. But if you look at the traffic flows of the people who are coming from the country, it's probably a lot less. People are obviously working home from COVID-19, and how that affects the likes of the, you know, the grid itself in terms of actually capacity is a question that we try to answer as a business, and obviously in terms of our lighting, in terms of our energy management. So looking at the urbanization really, and I suppose looking at the 55% of the global population is obviously moving, people are moving to cities, they're moving towards urban zones, and that puts obviously pressures on the likes of cityscapes, etc. And in terms of obviously COVID-19, etc., a lot of people have moved towards, we say, the west, or even, you know, even down south again to Kerry. People have moved away from Dublin because they can, because obviously the need of obviously being in an office space in Dublin has changed so much this year. But stats have shown that obviously over the last number of years, people have moved towards the urban scapes and obviously moved into popular zones, which puts pressure on the network, puts pressure on office spaces, and even pressure on people of obviously getting to and from work every day. So I suppose from our perspective alone, we have to obviously look at a number of different resources, and in terms of obviously managing our lighting needs and obviously our streetscapes, etc. I mean, even looking at the Samuel Beckett Bridge, we've color kinetics on that bridge, just an example of some of the works we've done around the city in Dublin. Sustainable urbanization really, and looking at, you know, the needs of transport and energy consumption, housing and infrastructure, and healthcare, education and employment. All of them items all require energy, and they all require lighting. Lighting as a whole really, people do forget about it. When it's a cold day and they put the heat on, they'll actually realize that the heat's not working, or they realize, well, the light's working, but they don't think about it. They will think quicker about heat rather than light. And I suppose it's a point that people don't think about, but yet they're paying for light as well. So in terms of obviously some of the projects we've done as a business, Belfast City Hall, for example, there are different ways of doing lighting, and it's not just all about, you know, the street light as such. It's more about being smart about lighting. So I suppose people talk about smart lighting. What is it? Looking at, for example, UVC lighting. Most people probably don't know about UVC lighting. It's really come to the forefront this year because of COVID-19. But for example, this is an over-air unit that actually has a UVC light in it. Now it actually will use the bandwidth really in terms of actually ultraviolet light and in terms of actually germ killing. So it actually, in Tullamore Hospital, there is actually a unit at the moment where it's on a robot. and it will actually go around and kill germs within the hospital scape, and it's actually a more sanitized way of actually cleaning the area. And it's been in Tullamore now for the last maybe 6 to 8 months before even COVID struck. So it's probably actually, one of my time frames are actually probably wrong. They're probably even longer than that. But in terms of obviously lighting, people don't think about disinfection. They don't think about, you know, horticultural office spaces, streetscapes, and obviously then domestic homes. There are a number of different ways of using light to benefit your own personal life. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why we'd like to discuss it tonight. So connected lighting and public safety, I suppose looking at street lighting, and I suppose I have to be selfish in a way, my role within Signify is road lighting. So in terms of actually what the road lighting aspect would be, and in terms of actually local authorities and their assets themselves, looking at, for example, a disturbance on the street and looking at obviously the response from police or response from whoever, in terms of obviously having a connected city or a connected streetscape. This is where lighting can be really useful in terms of actually interacting with people, getting people into not for example, even crowd management, going to football matches or whatever's going on. The assets that are already there can be very useful in terms of actually getting people involved in a cityscape, in terms of actually, for example, at nighttime when there's no one in the city. I mean, why have the lights to be on full blast in terms of actually using all their energy? So there's a number of different questions around actually connected lighting and how connected lighting actually works. And I suppose individual real-time control is exactly what we're talking about. So it gives the control back to the end user in terms of how you use your asset and how you actually make that asset work for you. So smart lighting, really, we looked at obviously roads and streets in terms of how we manage our roads, how we manage pedestrian sidewalks and crossings, bridge, parks and plazas. And as I showed some examples before, like the Samuel Beckett Bridge and obviously Belfast City Hall, their features, the feature lighting in that alone is something that enhance the city, enhance people's lives. A number of years ago when I was in college in DIT, we done a guerrilla lighting I suppose night really in Dublin, where a number of students who were sober at the time, I have to say, got some lamps, and we went around the city with some gels on it, and we took pictures of different streetscapes and different lighting within the city, and we proved that with a very small bit of light, it enhanced the area and enhanced the people's perception of a city. At nighttime, a city can be a beautiful place if it's lit properly. It can make people feel a lot more involved in a city. It can actually, and if anyone has been in Dublin over the last number of years, there's a lovely presentation that they use projectors onto different cityscapes. It enhances the cityscape, it enhances people's lives. Lighting is something that is obviously there, and how to be smart with that lighting and how to manage your energy is a real key that we obviously drive to benefit people's lives. So I suppose looking at all of them as a facet and as a full package, smart lighting, the benefits of people to make them safer, as I said, engaging citizens and boosting the quality of life for citizens, reducing obviously your energy costs. So looking at the older assets, for example, on a streetscape, as the years went by, the ESB obviously had a lot of assets that were on network poles. They've been over a number of years until they passed them on to local authorities to manage their budgets. Over the years with socks and sawn fittings, the energy on them alone would have been very high, and now they're reduced down to LED fittings. The quality of light, the type of light, the color of that light, how that actually is interactive. So the likes of 4,000 Kelvin lighting versus 3,000 Kelvin lighting. There's a massive retrofit project happening in Ireland this year that is moving from the likes of sawn fittings to socks fittings to LED. How that LED light is actually going to be implemented in the country across 280,000 lights is a really interesting question, because are you going to put a nasty white light up on a streetscape, or are you going to use a softer tone 3000 Kelvin? All of them questions are obviously to be answered, and that's something that obviously we in Signify have been talking to local authorities and obviously government about over the last number of years in terms of obviously the energy management. And obviously the likes of local authorities will have obviously an energy register, and that's something that obviously we get involved in as well. So there are a number of different ways to look at smart lighting and obviously the benefits of smart lighting. What should it do? I suppose from a smart lighting perspective, walking into your bedroom at night time, you switch the light on. That's a control mechanism. I suppose how we actually look at the control mechanisms within our business in terms of the photocell on a street light versus a remote sensor that actually has a traffic counting system on it, versus something that has our newer model of fitting that would have a D4i lantern as such. It will actually have a sensor built into it to actually monitor the temperature or monitor motion for people who are walking down the street. That's smart lighting as such, in terms of actually how it will enhance people's lives, and it also will enhance people's energy savings. At the end of the day, energy bills seem to be going up, and how we manage that as a community and as I suppose the citizens of this country, we have to obviously look at different ways of managing that energy needs. So identifying faults, real-time fault applications. So there's a number of different ways within the smart lighting that Mike will obviously go through and show in the presentation or in his live demo how we can actually use to our benefit the smart lighting and in terms of using the control system. So smart lighting in practice, I suppose, really looking at the Interact City software. It's a management system looking at the assets and obviously the sensors and the luminaires that are obviously located around. So for example, for people who would obviously look at the asset and the luminaire, we would have a sensor, City Touch sensor. It would have a SIM card, and that SIM card then will go onto a cloud system and then would feed back into the scene management and the Interact software, which is obviously secure. And Mike, you can probably talk more about that in a few minutes. In terms of the city dashboards, in terms of the end user, looking at their assets and looking at how the applications work and how they can actually benefit people's movement around a city at nighttime, and obviously maybe depending on different areas, different dimming regimes to save energy. So again, looking at sensors, for example, there's an underneath sensor on the newer fittings that are out, and it's not just Signify, by the way. I'm not, for a minute saying that other businesses out there aren't doing this as well, but this is what I'm obviously trying to dictate about our own fittings here and what we do as a business. But there are obviously sensors that can do temperature, road temperature, meteorological stations, etc. There's a number of different applications that obviously we can obviously interact with. So as I said, there are we have power consumption, energy consumption, dimming, switching controls, vehicle detection, tilt vibration, ambient light. There's a number of different controls and different sensors that we can actually use to detect different things. And I suppose being smart about a local authority as an asset, looking at your needs and looking at your requirements and how you actually benefit your own assets and how you can actually spread that around in different areas for different applications is exactly how you can actually be smart about lighting in it as a requirement. So again, go back to the dashboard, and again going back to the Interact City, and again, Mike, you might have a quick look at just coming in here in terms of the software system and looking at the backbone itself, but just basically again covering off on the City Touch system, having different methods of actually connection and different methods of actually using the applications. We obviously have a number of different ways to do it in terms of the older assets where you couldn't upgrade an existing asset. So you would use a pillar where you can actually put in connection in a pillar versus a new standard light. Instead of actually retrofitting to LED, you could actually upgrade some of your older lanterns by using a cabinet method as well. So there are applications in terms of obviously noise monitoring, detection of acoustic monitoring, in terms of obviously different applications really in terms of data enabling services like Wi-Fi. So there are a number of different I suppose evolving applications really that we can offer. So jumping on, I suppose, really to the demo, Mike, and I suppose taking over, I've kind of flown through them, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yep, thank you very much. Hopefully you can all hear me. I was having some sound problems earlier. What I'm going to do, if you could stop sharing your screen, please, Sean, and I can take over. I have a couple of demo sites that I'm going to show. One is a simulated site, so it's Washington DC, and it's just so I can show you energy data and a lot of fault data and things that we can come back from a simulated environment. I've got a live demo, which is actually a luminaire that's set up inside my garage that I use for doing these sort of demonstrations, where we can switch it on, switch it off, and talk about how we can do manual controls. And then I've got permission to use one of our local authorities' sites just to show you sort of the fault finding and the fault mechanisms that are available through smart lighting systems. And I say, as Sean was saying, this isn't just our system, this is CMS systems, control systems in general. They all kind of have the same sort of platform behind them, where you have your sensors and devices out on site. You then have your software and your software applications either based on a server in your own buildings or cloud hosted, as we do. And then there's links between those devices or that software and other tiers of smart cities. So your smart bins, your smart cameras, smart parking sensors, and those sort of things. So the intention today really is just to sort of show you a very high level and very quick view of some of the feedback you can get from just a smart lighting environment. I'm not talking about the rest of the smart cities kind of things. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully. Can you all see that, hopefully, Sean?
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. This is the Washington site as our sort of data we installed and populated about 10 years ago. So it's got an awful lot of data. It's been running in the background with simulated lanterns and things. And as you can see here on this energy tab, on a daily basis, we're using somewhere in the region of 940 megawatt hours, 94 megawatt hours on a daily basis. And we've got the ability to look through into the system and we'll go back a year. Get a little bit of delay, I think, with Teams running as or with Zoom running at the same time. But I can go back and look at the last year's worth of running. I can go back and look at the last 5 years worth of running. Let's see how quickly this runs. This is from 2016 through to now, and we can kind of start comparing how things have been running over the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 3 months. When we start applying dimming controls on large installations, we can compare maybe 1 month to another month. So we can add on here, and I can add 2018 to 2019. And we can see what these various changes in climate have been doing to our overall energy consumption over time. So there we can see a fairly, as you can see, it's a simulator. Pretty much everything is very similar. There's a few little variances, but I'll show more with the live site. But what it does give us is that CMS system lets look at a whole project, a whole town or a whole city. But we can also sort of dive in and start looking at it at a street level. So we can go in a little bit closer. I'll shoot a smaller screen actually. Let's go to. Okay, so these ones that are highlighted here, hopefully in light blue that you can see, we can look at those as a street and see how they've been running. I'll just select that again. And look at its energy consumption. And again, we can sort of see here now we're starting to look at the 1.3 megawatt hours per street. So we're getting down to a more granular level. And then we see that at a daily basis. And we can compare that with either the same street or another street from a different time period. So we can start doing some really good critical analysis and really good views and start thinking about how our towns and cities are using energy and how we can best optimize those in particular areas. One of the other things we can do is we can visualize our assets inside here and we can look at how much energy they are consuming. I go to the right one. And we can view those in quite a nice graphical way. So there's a little bit of delay with Zoom running, but I can now start looking here for my large energy consumers, and I can see, at the back end of it, 400 watts and 800 watt luminaires. It doesn't look like there's too many. Most of these sit below sort of 270. There's a few color changes in there, but also I can start looking at how these things have been being used. So we can look at their burning hours and when they might be due for cleaning or replacement. So we can use it to get a lot of visual data back from the system and look at when things have been installed. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly jump to my local demo. So this is the luminaire outside my house, or at the garage in my house. I can see it live. I can go and question it and query it live. So very quickly on here, I can ask to refresh real-time properties, and what this produces is a little table of what this lantern has been doing. So here's my tests prior to this presentation today. I can see that I had it switched on earlier at 100%, and it was consuming 31.4 watts, and its power factor was down at 92%. Voltage at my house is a nice stable sort of 245 to 250. So I'm just seeing it update there, so it's currently switched off. And at any time, if I want to, for the likes of maintenance or going out and live events or special events, I can go in there and I can take manual control of that luminaire. So that's just done through a manual control function. It lets me set any sort of dimming level and automatically resume its normal day-to-day working over a certain time period. Now, this system uses cellular. It takes about 30 seconds for things to get through the network, but we can see here that this traffic code's lost its question mark to say that it's finished switching on. So I'm just going to refresh its properties again. This will take about 30 seconds. So we can see here pending at the top. And 30 seconds always seems a long time in a live presentation. Here we go. So it's switched on. It's just powering up. So this lantern has a 35 to 40 second fade up. So it's come on. It's slowly powering up to 146 milliamp. Power's consuming, it's going up. And if I refresh it again now, hopefully we'll see it should be up at 31, 32 watts. Also on here, we can see from the sensor that it's roughly 20 degrees in my garage, which isn't too bad considering it's freezing cold outside. There we go, 33 watts energy consumption. And I can see that it's been burning for roughly 3,000 hours. And I can see the cumulative energy on here as well. So I get a lot of feedback in real time and live from the system, which is really good for fault management and fault testing before even sending somebody out to site. Or particularly if something's working and in light and a LED board or a lamp hasn't failed, you can check it all remotely, which is really good for big sparse areas, rural areas, to save the cost of sending somebody out to confirm something's working or not working. You can do a lot from just your dashboard. So one of the other things we have inside here, and I'll jump to the Isle of Wight site. This is the site I've been allowed to use. So I'll just scroll out a bit so you can see it all. This is a pretty good site in terms of that it's got some very nice dense urban areas and also some quite sparse villagey sort of areas. But what you can see here is this faults tab here is a live view of what's going on in the network right now. So I've got an asset ID location, and then I can see that some of these luminaires here have low current issues. I can click on those and zoom straight through and see where they are. I can then look at their energy and see if they're consuming the right amount of energy compared to their load profiles. I can even compare them to a working lantern right next door. So I can do a comparison. I can see clearly here that something's wrong because it's not consuming the energy it should be. And again, I could go and ask that for some real-time properties. Now, I mentioned it earlier, we have sort of what we call dimming calendars or automatic dimming. And this basically allows us to set dimming profile across whole areas. And you can see here that these different colored calendars on the main view map here are different calendars represented on here. And each one is a different sort of dimming regime that we can apply. So if I have a quick look at, for example, trial conflict area, inside here there's a load of dimming shapes, and I can see actually it's switching on to 80%, and then it's doing these several stages before running roughly at 50% overnight and then coming back up as we get towards rush hour in the morning. Other versions or other things that can be done with this, so on the Isle of Wight they have a big firework presentation on Cows Week, the big sailing regatta. And so when they had the fireworks on the seafront in Cowes, they actually dimmed the lights for 30 minutes for the duration of the fireworks to maximise impact. Of course, this can be tied not just to things like fireworks shows, but also architectural lighting shows and other things that you want to have a higher impact. You can dim the lights down, still keep them there for a relative amount of safety, and if really need be, override them manually for those sort of emergency situations. So generally, if you look at most of these, they're all running a standard sort of calendar, which is this always on. Sorry. It's their trial switch off calendar. So here they're looking to trial part night switching, and so they can just turn it on through the system. They don't have to go and change any photo cells or go out on site or do any differences. They can do everything remotely, run it for a week, 2 weeks, monitor the energy consumption of those and see what effect that's had over the 2 weeks, and obviously compare that with input from the public of whether it's been acceptable or not acceptable. And should there be an issue, should there be an emergency situation where the police require full light or there's been a vehicular accident, they have the option here to be able to take over manual control. So there's certain safety built into these systems when manual controls are available. But it allows you to really start focusing on how you can manage your energy that your lighting, street lighting, is consuming. Now, City Touch and Interact City is just one system that we can use for our city lighting. We have ourselves and other manufacturers obviously have the same sort of systems around architectural lighting. And there is the ability to use interlinks between these sort of systems, so that when an architectural lighting activity is triggered or is showing on a bridge, the lighting around it can automatically be turned to dim down, and not just through these calendars, but through an actual live link between the two systems. And you can start applying that to indoor applications as well. So with indoor smart lighting and building management systems, you can tie your car park lighting or your street lighting and your building lighting to all sort of dim switch off as an architectural show goes off. So you really start getting some great control and clarity that comes around these systems. So I didn't want to dive too deep into this. As Sean knows, I talked for about 2 hours on this or more days on this, in fact. So I really just wanted to sort of demonstrate these little things inside what smart cities are capable of. You know, here we're looking at almost 20,000 luminaires, and they're only really showing 39 faults because they have this regular daily feedback that they can get onto, and make sure these things are repaired in a real timely manner, and quite often before the public even report it. So yeah, very powerful systems, our competitors. But yeah, it's just a very quick overview of smart cities and smart lighting.
Okay.
Back to you, Sean.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mike. I suppose from our perspective alone, I suppose in touching on obviously the demonstration, you know, there's a lot more you can go in depth into the software and have a look at how the management itself of assets, and how you can actually look at it from an Irish application. People might say, well, you know, what's the point of having this City Touch system in Ireland, or even having it, you know, in remote locations? I suppose from an energy register point of view, and looking at local authorities and having a look at looking at their assets management really system and how they actually manage their energy requirements for 2030, you can do a lot with lighting. I noticed on the motorway this morning on the way to Dublin that a lot of the TI assets are turned off at junctions, etc. If there was a City Touch system installed, they would actually be able to reduce the energy overnight to a certain degree in terms of, you know, 50% savings, etc., rather than actually turning lights off. It's a safety conversation versus your energy management versus you know, I suppose public amenity areas, etc. So they're all questions are really on how to be smart and obviously using your assets to obviously make it better for a community, better for everyone really, and I suppose obviously reduce the energy consumption. I suppose looking at lighting as a whole in Ireland, it's now the biggest energy on the government's balance books really since Irish Water has moved off it, and that's obviously why we've to look at energy as a whole and in terms of our management structures really. So that's really our presentation. Thanks, Mike. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Sean and Michael. That was a very interesting presentation, and the demonstration there as well. I think it's quite timely, really, with, as you said, that we have our national LED programme rollout, and once we address that and move on to the energy savings LEDs, then suddenly we are open to start looking at getting smarter in how we manage our lights and what systems we use, and being able to monitor repairs or faults that are needed internally, and being able to manage it out on the ground. So I don't see any questions and answers. I'd say it's probably quite a technical topic really for people as well. But at the same time, if anyone has any questions they'd like to raise, either on the Q&A, if anyone has anything just for the moment, or if not, we can close our lecture for this evening.